Welcome back to the Cyclonic Rift Sol Ring extravaganza of EDH. And today we are still discussing Brago, and right now I'm going to discuss ways to protect Brago, ways to ramp, and counterspells. To start, we're going to talk about ramp. Ramp is an extremely easy thing to do with a Brago deck, because one of the cooler and more subtle functions Brago can do is, let's say you play Sol Ring here, one of the best mana rocks in EDH. The cool thing Brago can do is after you've tapped it on main phase 1, if he hits someone and flickers it, it comes back into play untapped. This is an important function for a lot of the artifacts I've included in this deck. So, obviously to start we have Sol Ring, which is probably the most flexible and one of the best mana rocks. However, for Brago, that's not good enough. So he typically will find himself abusing Mana Vault, which is a 1-mana artifact that taps for 3, but it doesn't untap normally. Unless you're playing Brago and then you just flicker it out, and you're a cheater, like me. Very, very good. Similarly, we have Grim Monolith, which, unlike Mana Vault, which can hurt you if you can't untap it, Grim Monolith doesn't hurt at all. And then we go into more fair rocks. We have Azorius Signet. Since we do have a lot of colorless in the deck, it's nice to have a filtered rock that can just filter that into, the colors we may need. Talisman of Progress. Can be colorless, can be colored. It's like a pain land. Thran Dynamo. A pretty solid rock that can untap on its own, but is just enough ramp to get you through the early game. Gilded Lotus. Similar to Thran Dynamo, except it produces colored mana, which makes it very valuable. And the last rock, but not the last ramp spell, we have Chromatic Lantern, which turns every colored, non-colored producing land into a colored producing land. Additionally, this gets around, cards like Cephaloid Colosseum that hurt you when you tap. We have Solemn Simulacrum here. This is a flicker deck. He is quite ridiculous when you can flicker him in and out and get all that basic land into play. We have Grand Arbiter Augustine IV, a very good inclusion for a white-blue ramp, because he can also cripple your opponents, and I did mention we have a stacks sort of tax theme, so he kind of fits right in with that bill. And he also makes for a great alternative commander. And the last ramp spell we have is Tezzeret the Seeker, who actually is stronger in utility, but he does function very, very well as a ramp spell, as he can untap artifacts, search your library for artifacts, and then the utility is he can turn all your artifacts into beaters and win you the game. He is a win condition, and he often gets a lot of hate, but there's not so much they can do when you have a slew of counterspells. And speaking of which, let's get right into those. So to start, we have, we're going to talk about some counterspells that are restrictive rather than all-inclusive, soft counters versus hard counters, basically. To start, we have Swan Song, the best 1-mana counterspell, I think, at least in my opinion, it's one of the best ones in the game. You counter out an enchantment, an instant, or sorcery, they get a bird. Remand. I chose this art because it is Azorius, and I kind of wanted to stay a little on theme. This is modern counterspell, but it's also a really good counterspell in a stacks theme, especially when it draws you a card and gives you the tempo you desire. We have Memory Lapse. And while we want to build tempo, we also want to ruin other people's tempo, and making someone draw the same card again, it's not that bad. We have Delay, which is kind of a hard counter, kind of not. This is typically what I will use to postpone a card that could pretty much ruin me, or slow me down, etc., etc. But Delay is best used against other counterspells, because what are they going to counter when all those time counters come off? Then we have, for the last soft counter, Muddle the Mixture. Counter target instant or sorcery, but really transmute to search your library for a 2-mana spell. That is the real reason why it's in the deck, but I do counter some spells sometimes in emergency situations. Now for the hard counters. Pact of Negation. When it's about time to combo out and you need to protect your combo, there is no other card more dependable than Pact of Negation, other than Force of Will. I don't have the money for Force of Will, so Pact of Negation will do. Arcane Denial. Pretty hard counter, but still pretty political. But good lord, this is one of the more ridiculous counterspells sometimes. Especially since it draws you a card. Your opponent gets to draw 2 cards, I think. I don't really read past that. Counterspell. Render Silent. Now, definitely a great late game counter, a pretty bad early game counter. Render Silent is silence plus counterspell. It's not bad. Hinder. When someone's got a general I don't like, I can hinder it. If they have a devastating spell I don't like, I can hinder it. Cryptic Command, the Swiss Army pocket knife of counterspells. I could have thrown this in removal, I could have thrown this in utility, I could have thrown this in draw. This couldn't do anything. Vincer, Shaper Savant. Combo piece-ish. Really good counterspell, and ridiculous if you can keep flickering him with Brago, because you can return permanents back to their owner's hands after you've already returned a spell to their hand. Vincer is a really good guy, but the winner of the counterspell extravaganza is going to be Glendolindra Archmage. Because of her persist and Brago's ability to flicker her, this card never truly dies. I have not actually had her truly die while I have been playing this deck. It's phenomenal. And lastly, before I end this video, we're going to talk about ways to protect Brago. I don't have many because Brago typically goes through fine on his own, but just in case, we have Lightning Greaves. Pretty staple card for EDH. Gives them Shroud Haste for 0 on the equipped, but 2 to cast. I could grab it with Tezzeret and have a sneak attack with Brago. It's not bad. I don't like the Shroud, though. Unquestioned Authority. Definitely I use this for the fact that it can draw you a card, but protection from creatures can make Brago a block after he's, gone through and hit them. And lastly, Thassa. Her Scry effect and ability to make things unblockable makes her a very valuable asset to the deck. While I don't usually get her Devotion on, she does quite fine as a 3-mana enchantment on her own. But she does have the potential to become a creature and therefore beat face when the time is right. But that's all we're going to talk about in this video. In the next video we'll talk more about draw, removal, and some combos. See you then.